Hello, this is Nathan Wood, pastor of North Dayton Baptist Church. Welcome to day 248 of the McShane Reading Plan. So glad you could join us. We're in 1 Samuel 29 and 30, 1 Corinthians 10, Ezekiel 8, and John 9. Ezekiel 8's got some bizarre imagery here. We've got a flaming, glowing angel that takes Ezekiel by the hair of the head and takes him around Jerusalem and shows him the idolatry of the house of Israel. And it's interesting, the image, the idol that he takes Ezekiel to first, it's an image of jealousy. And it says, "Behold, the glory of the glory of the God of Israel was there, according to the vision that I saw in the plain." That's very interesting that it says that the glory of the God of Israel is there at that image of jealousy. Now, there are other abominations that are listed, but why does it say the glory of the God of Israel is on this image, or located near this image of jealousy? Is it saying that God is giving some sort of a seal of approval to the image of jealousy, or the worship of this idolatrous force of jealousy? We make gods. We make idols, Gentiles especially, have made gods to love, to peace, to war, these metaphysical things, and that bleed into the physical, and also physical, sun, moon, stars, lightning, all that sort of thing. And some of them come from myth, some of them are worshiping fallen angels and forces of nature, worshiping the creature rather than the creator. Here is a shrine to jealousy. So is God pointing to his seal of approval of the worship of jealousy? No. But I do find it interesting that Israel is provoking him to jealousy. Israel is provoking God to jealousy. There's a bad sort of jealousy in which somebody is jealous of somebody else's good, and that's wrong, if the good is indeed good. And it's even bad if you're jealous of somebody for something that they're in the wrong of doing. But there is a a righteous jealousy, like a man who is jealous for the affection of his wife. He wants her and her alone, and he wants to have her exclusively. Likewise, a wife to a husband. Jealous. That's a good jealousy. Sadly, in the 1960s, that became and other times, not just the 60s, that became bad. Oh, it was bad to be jealous of love. It's like, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with, or all that sort of thing. But love craves exclusivity. In our passage in our chapters in 1 Samuel, David talks about David's two wives. I mean, obviously he's gone crazy after Michal has turned his back on him, and he just kind of goes his own way and does whatever. That doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it good. Love desires to be exclusive. And that's how God sees it. He wanted Israel to himself. And God is jealous for Israel. God is jealous for Israel. And I think that's why Paul talks about how Israel's salvation, when somebody who is a Jew comes to salvation in Jesus Christ, they're provoked to jealousy. He tells about it in Romans. So they become jealous of their God. God goes to another people, the Gentiles, and starts saving them and dealing with them and ordaining them and blessing them. And the Jews say, "What are you doing with my Messiah?" Jealousy. For good. And God grafts the wild branches into the tame olive tree, and the tame branches can be grafted into their own olive tree, and so forth. But jealousy in this instance is a good thing. So it's not God, I don't think. I really don't know. I know for a fact. It's not God's putting a stamp of approval on worship of jealousy or an idol. But the glory of the Lord is showing that he is jealous. I think that's safe to say. God is jealous for Israel. It doesn't mean that he's not going to chastise them. He certainly does. He chastises all of his loved ones to make us better than what we are, to sanctify us. But he dearly loves them, and he is jealous for them. It's interesting. In 1 Samuel 29, moving into chapter 30, the lords of the Philistines seemed, this is a natural order. They seemed jealous for the loyalty of David and didn't trust him. Figured that David would turn on them in the battle against Saul. And God has blessed David so he doesn't have to raise his hand in battle against Saul, while maintaining his lot to be loyal and a man of his word. So he fights off the enemies of Israel with the Philistines. And then he eventually conquers the Philistines. But it's really quite something to see how things go about. I also think that in verse 6 of 1 Samuel 30, and David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons, and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. Rejected, minority, defeated, rejected by the people even he was running with, because he'd been rejected by the king of Israel. You're not always going to be able to run with the popular crowd. Stick with the Lord. Stick with the Lord. Encourage yourself in the Lord your God, even when people are looking to stone you. Interesting, isn't it? They followed him all this way. Kind of makes you think of all the Davidic Psalms talking about his enemies and his friends betraying him. Man after God's own heart. God himself was despised and rejected and betrayed. Not a coincidence. Also, look, the person who goes down to the battle and the one who tarries by the stuff, their part shall be alike. Preachers and evangelists do not get more glory than prayers and workers in the congregation of Israel here, or in the congregation of the church. Everybody is either a hand or a foot or an eye or a mouth or a toe or a thumb. Everybody has a part to play. And let's see, 1 Corinthians 10. Wherefore let him that think he standeth take heed lest he fall. That's a big one. There hath no temptation taken you, but which is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. Flee from idolatry. interesting that God's by jealousy. If the household of Israel, if the leaders had not worshipped as an idol their own religion, they wouldn't have had to deal with jealousy now, would they? If we'd have just had a good relationship with God to begin with and not rejected Him, we wouldn't have to deal with jealousy, would we? Funny what fickle games we play. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. Idolatry breeds jealousy. So even though there's a good use for jealousy, jealousy is a derivative of fallenness and brokenness. We tend to celebrate it and what shall we say? We tend to relish in it and romance stories and tales. And it is a big love story. The Bible is a big love story, full of jealousy and pride and sacrifice and rejection and all sorts of things. It's the greatest love story ever told. But the idea is to get to a place of perfect, nothing between us and God. We don't celebrate the jealousy. It's a means to an end. Whether therefore ye eat, verse 31, or drink, or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God. That's a good rule of thumb. And if you can't put God's name next to it in some way, form, or fashion, and I'm not saying that, just put your God's name on anything and it'll make it right. No. A good judgment of whether or not what you're doing is actually what God wants you to be doing is, do you think that God would want His name on it? And if you can't put God's name on it, then why are you doing it? If it doesn't bring Him glory, why are you doing it? That's a good measuring rod. But it's not just a measuring rod. We should actively want to do the Lord's will for His glory. That's one of my favorite verses of Scripture, by the way. And John 9, using a bad situation, even when it's no fault of our own, or even if it is our fault, God can use bad situations for His glory. Not just good ones. Just like He uses jealousy for His glory. It's a marvelous thing. It's interesting that I really want to point this out. This man knows more. He just got his eyesight. He's never read a book. He's been an outcast all his life, and he knows more about the Lord than these people do. Than the leaders, the scribes and Pharisees know. Excuse me. He knows more than they know. He knows that this man can't do these miracles unless God's with him. And what's more is that these guys know that too, and that's why they're rejecting it. When they say give God the praise or give God the glory, they're not saying, oh, well, God healed you. No, they're saying, fess up. It's like when, who was the guy's name that hid the treasure of Jericho, and they did so poorly against Ai. It escapes me right now. But Joshua says, give God glory. Fess up. So they're telling him, hey, give up this ruse. Give God the glory. Give up this charade. We don't believe you. We don't believe you. And he says, all I know is I was blind and now I see. And he doubles down. He doubles down. We know this man is a sinner. They know they have to reject the miracle. Because if they accept it, they have to own that it's a messianic miracle. Never before had a man born blind been ever healed. Never. Messianic miracle. And what happens when hypocrites can't be convinced? You push them too hard. They can't be reasoned with. Shut him down, shove him out, cast him aside, mock, all this sort of thing. And what does God do? God the Son, Jesus Christ, picks him up. Do you believe in the Son of God? Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. The ones who were blind are being given sight, and the ones who think they see are being blinded. That's conditional, by the way. The gospel is genuinely offered to all. Will you harden your heart, or will you open your eyes? Will you harden your heart, or will you open your eyes? The Lord is not slack concerning his promise. And the time of the Gentiles may very well be coming to a close. I'm not saying that no Gentile can be saved after, but it's going to be a different time. Do not, please do not reject this time of grace. You may not have it tomorrow, but his hand is reaching out to you. Trust in Jesus today. Trust that he shed his blood, died, and rose again for you. We love you. Have a good day.